Hey y'all, and welcome back to another Photoshop tutorial. My name is Jane Corley with PicVisions, Media Arts and Photography. If it's your first time here, welcome! Every Monday we go over tips, tools, and techniques to help you become a better post-production artist in Adobe Photoshop. Today we are learning about how to use Camera Raw as well as how to best edit landscape photography images. This Camera Raw video is long overdue. I've mentioned it a number of times in my previous tutorials as well as in my tutorials on my Photography Friday collection. If you haven't seen any of those, please take a look at them. They're really great content where we go over tips, tools, and techniques to become a better photographer and media business owner. RAW is a file format that captures all the image data recorded by the sensors within your camera when you take a photo. RAW images have to go through an editing process before they are shared, as RAW is not a universally recognized file format. It is too large for most sharing platforms and is much too large for social media and web-based platforms. If you shoot in JPEG format rather than RAW or JPEG and RAW, the image is going to be compressed. This compression results in a lower quality of image where an element of the image may be lost through the compression of the image. Highlights, shadows, hue, saturation, and crippling exposure adjustments that cannot be received in post-production when shooting in JPEG. RAW files are shown with a .nef extension instead of a .jpg or PSD or TIFF or PNG. RAW is available in most cameras these days. Even the smaller point-and-shoot cameras have the ability to shoot RAW and JPEG RAW. RAW image processing is also non-destructive. You're not making any changes to the original image, and once the RAW image is adjusted like you like it in this Camera Raw window, you'll be able to save it off into a new folder under a different file format. This makes batch processing a breeze. Then, by bringing the selected images into Photoshop or Lightroom workspaces, you can make smaller edits to the image or remove or add content and make smaller adjustments to individual images, like removing content, adding content, or just making basic manipulations to certain parts of the image. This workflow changes the game of editing images. It seems like, dang, now I have to spend more time in Photoshop editing my images because every image has to be edited. Nope, this is not the case. This is because it actually takes less time to edit images because of the select all and batch processing aspects of shooting in RAW. If you're still shooting in JPEG shooting mode because you're confident that you'll get it right in camera, just know that you're missing out. Your images become so much deeper with the integration of Camera Raw. When you edit them through this method, your images become so much deeper and intriguing when you edit them with Camera Raw. The look of the images is now able to match the look and feel of the environment more because of the adjustments available. What does RAW format give you that JPEG just doesn't allow in post-production? RAW allows for the highest quality of the image possible by not making any corrections or processing to the image in camera. The photographer has more creative control to the qualities of the image. JPEG alone only has 256 levels of brightness, where RAW contains 4,000 to 16,000 levels of brightness that can be manipulated. So an 8-bit JPEG is reflected into a 12-bit or even a 14-bit brightness level when you're using Camera Raw. This extra information in the image also allows for so many more adjustments. Exposure, blacks, contrast, clarity, brightness, shadows, highlights, posturization, vibrance, and saturation are now individually manipulated. In JPG, the white balance is predetermined within the camera, where a RAW image has much more accessibility to make adjustments to the white balance and hue. The detail available to recover in the RAW format is amazing. With RAW, if you are a professional or want to become more of a professional, the ability to include copyright information is one of the easiest things to do with Camera Raw settings. After the images are edited and saved off, you can add copyright and contact information, further preserving the protection of your intellectual property. Now, the negatives for shooting in RAW. RAW images are a much larger file format than JPEGs. RAW file formats will require more storage, so if you're low on storage space, RAW is not the way for you. If you're delivering images to clients immediately, choose to shoot in JPEG RAW in order to give them proofs to buy yourself some time for editing. Or just make sure to get it right in camera and provide them with the JPEG and have the Camera Raw as a digital negative. Another negative for shooting in Camera Raw is if you're shooting quick action shots where you need lightning fast speed from your camera in order to capture the perfect shot. RAW files are much larger than JPEGs, so they take a longer beat before allowing the camera to snap another shot. If you don't have editing capabilities of Lightroom or Photoshop at your disposal, that's another negative for Camera Raw. You'll need to choose one of the programs outside of Photoshop and Lightroom in order to develop your Camera Raw images. Because if you don't have a way to process the images, there's no reason to shoot in this format. The other options for processing raw images if you don't have Lightroom or Photoshop are Capture One, Luminar, Darktable, Raw Therapy, and raw editing software that is available with your camera. So let's jump into it and get associated with this window. I have selected 4 images from a grouped image file located on my computer in my desired file folder. I brought these images in and they come up in this preview window. You can choose to select all, which will allow you to make edits to all 4 images at the same time, but the images will need identical adjustments or similar adjustments with just minor tweaking to the individual images if you choose this method of editing. These 3 images have different levels of white balance and different highlights, shadows, manipulations that need to be made, so I'll do them one at a time. As you see here, you have your histogram option. Your histogram option will adjust in real time depending on the edits that you make in the Camera Raw window. You also have additional panels found here. You have Basic, Tone Curve, Detail, Hue, Saturation, Luminosity, and Grayscale, Split Toning, Lens Correction, Effects, Camera Calibration, Presets if you choose to upload them, as well as snapshots if you allow to upload them. Here you can click on and off of the preview as your edits are made live. You have a trash can to eliminate it from your preview window, a rotation to the clockwise and a rotation to the counterclockwise. You also have an ability to open your preference dialog box, as well as a graduated filter, adjustment brush, red eye remover, spot removal, straightening, crop tool, target adjustments, color sampler tool, white balance tool, the hand tool, and the zoom tool. I do prefer to use my spacebar command for the hand tool, as well as the Control plus and Control minus for the zoom tool, which works identically to the way it works in Photoshop. So let's get started on adjusting an image. Found here you can do custom white balance, or you can choose from the other white balance options. I typically leave it on custom. You have temperature, tint, exposure, contrast, highlights, shadows, whites, blacks, clarity, vibrance, and saturation. As I said before, if you were to select all 4 of these images and make adjustments on these sliders, you could do adjustments on all 4 of the images at one time. But when you're dealing with different white balance modes, just do one image at a time. To reset the images, double click on the sliders in the middle to reset the options chosen, to refer back to the original of the way that it was shot if you have adjustments made in your Camera Raw. Moving forward, we will make these adjustments. I tend to leave exposure to the end because the shadows, the highlights, the whites, and the blacks should make most of the adjustments. I tend to find what is most populated within the image and start there first. So I have a lot of shadows and blacks, so I'm going to start with my darker tones in this image. My shadows, I'm going to bump them up until I find that I have detail and contrast in these darker areas again. Same with the blacks. Continue to adjust. Then I'll move on to my highlights and my whites. The highlights found in the Spanish moss area, I really want to let those sing. So I'm going to bring them up and lighten them so that they become more prevalent. The whites are going to wash out some of the areas, so do be careful about how you adjust. Next, I move on to contrast and clarity. Contrast is going to add a little bit of darkness back into the image in order to create the contrast. If this becomes too much and you want additional contrast, just bring your blacks down and your shadows down. Make minor adjustments until you get it just right. I'll move down to clarity. Clarity is going to brighten from the highlight areas and the areas around the highlights. Then we're going to move into vibrance to make the colors more vibrant, and the saturation to saturate the colors. If this still is too dark for you and you have some wiggle room to move around in your lights and your highlights, feel free to adjust your exposure, but you shouldn't have to adjust it too much, because with Camera Raw, you do want to get it as close to perfect when you shoot it. Then we'll go to tint and temperature. I do want to adjust a small amount over to the yellows to get a few more yellow bumps in those Spanish moss areas where the sun is peeking through, and I'll bring the greens a minor amount to let those greens sing. Up in this histogram window, we have shadow clipping warning. That is because in these shadow areas we have some shadows lost. So continue to bring down your blacks and your shadows until you meet a compromise between you, your eyes, and the histogram. We'll move to the tonal curve. The basics, tonal curve, and detail panels are really the ones that I typically use the most. We'll bring our highlights up just a little bit more, same with our lights, to try and create an S-curve. Same with our shadows, we'll attempt to bring them down just a little bit and pair it with our darks to get the look that we want. With sharpening, you can increase your sharpening amount, but do be wary that this does cause noise. Don't go too far, especially when it comes to your luminance, because that's what creates your noise. We'll go back to basics if you need to make any additional adjustments, and move on. You can choose to save the images as you go, but my workflow is to wait until the end and save all of the images off, especially if I'm saving them all to the same project file. Let's move on to our next image. So I absolutely love this image, and I love this image especially after it comes out of Camera Raw processing. So I'm going to use the crop tool for this image. Make your basic crop box, and to provide straightening instruction, what I will do is I will line up my box parallel or right on top of the line that I'm going to use for a reference. I'm going to use the corner of this building right here for my reference. That's going to create a straight image. I'll confirm that all of the detail that I wish to include in my image is present, and just hit enter or return and it will make the adjustment for you. If you need to make additional cropping adjustments because this is not the way you want it, just click on your crop box and your whole image is still available. As I said earlier, the Camera Raw editing is non-destructive. It's not going to make adjustments to the original, so you always will have this original to work with. So let's go into our highlights, because I want to prioritize this white paint and really make the whites and the highlights sing along with the detail in the brick that the artist is using for a canvas. So I'm going to take my whites and I'm going to bring them up. I'm going to take my highlights and I'm going to bring them up. I'm going to take my shadows, I'm going to bring them down slightly because I want to get some of these really great gray tonality shadows in the figure. Then with my blacks, I will bring them down slightly, but not too much to wash it out. Then let's make a small adjustment to our shadows, how it's reflecting back here on the hat she's wearing, and we will go into our contrast, which really makes a huge difference, and our clarity. Then I'm going to bump my saturation and vibrance, and then I'll make small adjustments to get the color of the brick as well as some of this orangey red in here exactly like I want it. Continue to make small adjustments until I have it exactly the way that I want it. We'll move into our curves. And then we'll do a small amount of sharpening to get the rural detail that we're looking for. Go back to my basics, and I'm going to adjust my exposure by just just a small amount to bring a little bit more lighting into the image because I think it looks better if we do. The goal is to get it as close to perfect in post-production so that you don't have to make too many exposure adjustments because you don't want it to be reflected with the gamma correction making it look cloudy and not correctly exposed. So let's take a look at our next image. Our next image is this awesome little intimate nook of a community garden, and it's got a lot of great opportunities for color and for contrast and different shadows and highlights that we're really going to make pop and sing. So first, let's prioritize our highlights because this is an opportunity to blow out your highlights right here, but we do want to bring out the contrast and the richness of the whites in these rocks. So we will bump our highlights and bump our whites. Do be mindful of this area here. We don't want to blow it out too much, so we'll bring our highlights down just a little bit so that that's not so distracting. Next, we're going to adjust our shadows. We have a lot of really great shadows, but we do have some dark blacks that are getting lost of detail here. So we'll bring our blacks down just a little bit, but we'll bump our shadows in the other direction. This will give depth to our image. Then we'll adjust contrast, giving a little bit more depth, and clarity to give it a little bit crisper look. A little bit less, that's a little too much. Then we'll bump our vibrance to get some great colors in the reflections on that funnel, and then the saturation, maybe a little bit less vibrance. There we go. I'm going to bring my highlights up just a little bit more along with my whites, and then bring my blacks down just a little bit, and then I'm going to make the exception with my exposure just to get a little bit more. Then I'm going to come to my temperature and make it a little bit warmer, and I'm going to come to my tint and take some of that green out, giving a little bit more of this magenta to these reflections here, as well as the flower, which I wish to be my focal point. This is a really great example for if you are going to be taking an image from Camera Raw and then putting it into Photoshop for further adjustments. This eliminates almost all of your adjustment layers doing it in Camera Raw. The only reason why you put it in Photoshop or even in Lightroom is to get rid of things within the image. So say I wanted to get rid of this tag right here. I could then say open image after I made my raw adjustments and take out that portion of the image and then saving it once again. So I'll show you that after we get done making the final edits. Let's move on to our final image, this awesome Big Lebowski that's actually on the side of a bowling alley, which I thought was relatively clever. And I'll just reiterate again, y'all, if you have the opportunity to go to Asheville and take pictures in their rad district, do it. Absolutely do it. I've been in photography for over 15 years now, and this was probably one of the most exciting images to post-produce. So let's jump in because I'm super excited about the Big Lebowski. First, let's analyze what we've got. This storm drain right here has created a lot of washout highlights. So, to correct washed out highlights, we're going to darken our highlight slider. Notice what our histogram is doing. It's going crazy, but it will settle down once the highlights get balanced. Then with your whites, you can bring your whites down, but it will create a little bit of a gray that you might not like. So, hand in hand, we'll bring our blacks down and we'll bring our shadows up. This has a little bit of fogginess to it, which is a gamma correction. So we're going to bring our exposure down just a little bit, a tenth. So really just a little bit, because we're going to correct that gamma correction with our contrast and with our clarity. Now, since there is such great, brilliant color in this piece, we don't need to manipulate our vibrance and saturation too much. And if you go overboard, feel free to adjust the tint. I'm going to bring a little bit more blue in, and I'm going to bring a little bit more green in because that magenta was a little overpowering. If you find yourself needing to make an adjustment back, like with this exposure, you can just easily turn the slider. So, what now? Let's select all and hit Save Images because we're done. We need to save our images, and we want to make a few adjustments to this guy in Photoshop, but everything else is good to go. So I'm going to choose to use the same location, but I'm going to put it into a new folder. This area here is the file naming area. This is really important if you're giving proofs to a client, or actually finals to a client, and you want to go ahead and name the files. If you have less than 100 files to transfer to your client, I would do 2-digit serial numbers and then add a title. You can custom make your title, or you can choose serial numbers, serial letters, dates, any kind of format, but I prefer to create my own file extension. Here you have the same options for the beginning of the file name. You can keep it the same file name, or you can do it in a serial number. I do prefer the serial number method, and if you have over 100 photos, anywhere from 100 to 999, then you can do 3-digit serial numbers and so on. Serial letters and month and date work the same way, but we'll just come in here and say 2-digit serial number, and we'll say Photoshop raw tutorial. This will create an image that is titled 01 plus Photoshop raw tutorial. This is also really great if you're wanting to do underscore PicVisions or underscore Jane Corley, and title and copyright within the document title. The beginning number. The beginning number can be set to 01. It can also be set to 59. So if you have worked on 58 images from one collection and you want to add additional items to that collection, you can change your beginning number to the next number in the series. Then you can go to your file extension. Your file extension can be any of these options, including a PSD format. The format that the images are going to be exported in, JPEG. Then you can include metadata. This metadata is really awesome because you can actually copyright and include contact information within the metadata within all of the images. So, like I said earlier, all you have to do is put them into Photoshop and then run a set of actions to place a watermark, and wham bam, you're done. Finally is quality. If you're doing web-based platforms, stick in the 5 to 7 or 8 to 9 range, and then if you're doing for prints, put that in the maximum quality range of 10 to 12. Then simply hit save, and down here you'll see how quickly those images are being transferred into that file where they can be found and edited. After all of your images are done saving, simply click the one that you wish to continue editing in Photoshop and hit Open Image. The image will pop up within the Photoshop window just like a new document in a JPEG format, because that's how we saved it. Just like any other project we've worked on in Photoshop, I'm going to click and drag to create a new copy of the background, and then simply hit S for stamp, hit Alt to select the area where I want to make my stamp from, or, we haven't learned this one yet, select your lasso tool, select around the area you wish to adjust, right click, fill, content aware, normal blending mode, opacity at 100%, and simply hit OK. Photoshop will compare the pixels around the area you wish to be changed and do a content aware, eliminating the content of that lasso selection for you. This can be done in smaller scale, and this can absolutely be done in larger scale. But when done in larger scale, do be very careful because it cannot look right. And just look jumbled up. So you may have to go in and make a few adjustments to make it look a little cleaner. In this area here, you can also come in and make your dodge and burn selections to brighten up select areas and give additional highlights where you want them. You can also diminish some blown out areas with your burn tool, or you can make a levels adjustment and darken up those areas with a mask. So you create the layer, select the mask, hit Control I, make sure you have white and black selected, white to reveal from the mask as we've learned in our previous tutorials, and I'm at 5% opacity. If you don't see the changes made as quickly as you like, simply hit your enter or return button, type in a different number of a higher value, and then continue painting. You are revealing from this mask. You can use any or all of these adjustment layers in landscape photography post-production, similar to the way that we used them in portraits in my last video. I am going to come in and make adjustments to the purples in here. So I'm going to slide towards the magenta until I get the quality correct. I'm not going to pay any attention to anything else other than the area where I want the quality of the image to be. Hit Control or Command I, B for brush, and 20% opacity, let's put it more like 10. And I'm just going to click on that area until I get the vibrance of purple that I want from those flowers, simply with a mask. I'm also going to use that same magenta enhancement and bring out a few more of those purpley shadows in this little funnel bucket. Then I'm going to come to do a brightness and contrast layer. I'm going to bump up my brightness, Control I, B for brush, and I'm going to bring a little bit more into these rocks, because I don't want to blow out this area by making that adjustment in RAW. I want to make a controlled adjustment. That's why I brought it into Adobe Photoshop. So these tips and tricks can be used in any landscape. Landscapes are probably one of the most popular photos to edit in Adobe Photoshop, or really just the most popular photos to take for beginning photographers and post-production artists, because you don't need a model, you don't need a schedule, you can go out and you can do it by yourself. So these intimate moments and making the feeling and tone of these intimate moments is what post-production is all about. You want to make sure to not go overboard and make it look genuine and authentic so that your viewer finds it aesthetically pleasing. It's all about how you frame it, it's all about how you crop it, it's all about how you do your post-production to make it look the way you want it to look. A lot of post-production artists have a look and a feel to their images individual to their own styles. So get your tone of voice by your post-production. Find what you like and what you think is the most satisfying way to perform post-production. Please do leave in the comment section below any tips and tricks you have for your fellow post-production artists on adjusting landscape photography as well as using the camera raw window. I look forward to seeing you guys next week when we talk about product photography post-production. What to be mindful of, how to crop and make framing adjustments, and how to make the product of your photo the star of your photo. Do make sure to like this video if you learned something new, subscribe to the channel, and ring the bell if you have not done so already so you don't miss videos every single week. And make sure to tune in on Friday when we go over our Photography Friday and Media Arts class. Every Friday. I look forward to seeing you guys next time. Until then, I'm Jane Corley with Pick Visions, Media Arts and Photography. See you later, guys.